This article refers to the son of Napoleon III. For the stepson of Napoleon I, see Eugène de Beauharnais Napoléon. Prince Imperial was the only child of Emperor Napoleon III of France and his empress consort Eugénie de Montijo. After his father was dethroned in 1870, he relocated with his family to England. On his father's death in January 1873, he was proclaimed Napoleon IV, Emperor of the French by the Bonapartist faction. In England he trained as a soldier. Keen to see action, he successfully put pressure on the British to allow him to participate in the Anglo-Zulu War. In 1879, serving with British forces, he was killed in a skirmish with a group of Zulus. His early death sent shockwaves throughout Europe, as he was the last serious dynastic hope for the restoration of the Bonaparte to the throne of France. Biography. Born in Paris, he was baptized on 14 June 1856, at Notre Dame Cathedral. His godfather was Pope Pius IX, whose representative, Cardinal Patrici, officiated. His godmother was Queen Victoria, represented by Eugène de Beauharnais' daughter, Josephine, the Queen of Sweden. His education, after a false start under the academic historian Francis Monier, was, from 1867, supervised by General Frossard as governor, assisted by Augustin Philin, as tutor. His English nurse, Miss Shaw, who was recommended by Queen Victoria and taught the prince English from an early age. His valet, the famously loyal Xavier Ullman, and his inseparable friend Louis Conneau also figured importantly in his life. The young prince was known by the nickname Lalou in his family circle. At the outbreak of the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 to 1871, he accompanied his father to the front and first came under fire at Saarbrücken. When the war began to go against the Imperial arms, however, his father sent him to the border with Belgium. In September he sent him a message to cross over into Belgium. He travelled from there to England, arriving on 6 September, where he was joined by his parents, the Second Empire having been abolished. The royal family settled in England at Camden Place in Chislehurst, Kent. On his father's death, Bonapartists proclaimed him Napoleon IV. On his 18th birthday, a large crowd gathered to cheer him at Camden Place. The Prince Imperial attended elementary lectures in physics at King's College London. In 1872, he applied and was accepted to the Royal Military Academy, Woolwich. He finished 7th in his class of 34, and came top in riding and fencing. He was then commissioned into the Royal Artillery in order to follow in the footsteps of his famous great-uncle. During the 1870s, there was some talk of a marriage between him and Queen Victoria's youngest daughter, Princess Beatrice. Victoria also reportedly believed that it would be best for the peace of Europe if the prince became Emperor of France. The prince remained a devout Catholic, and retained hopes that the Bonapartist cause might eventually triumph if the secularizing Third Republic failed. He supported the tactics of Eugène Rouher over those of Victor, Prince Napoleon, breaking with Victor in 1876. With the outbreak of the Zulu War in 1879, the Prince Imperial, with the rank of lieutenant, forced the hand of the British military to allow him to take part in the conflict, despite the objections of Rouher and other Bonapartists. He was only allowed to go to Africa by special pleading of his mother, the Empress Eugénie, and by intervention of Queen Victoria herself. He went as an observer, attached to the staff of Frederick Thesiger, 2nd Baron Chelmsford, the commander in South Africa, who was admonished to take care of him. Louis accompanied Chelmsford on his march into Zululand. Keen to see action, and full of enthusiasm, he was warned by Lieutenant Arthur Brigger, a close friend, not to do anything rash and to avoid running unnecessary risks. I reminded him of the Empress at home and his party in France. Chelmsford, mindful of his duty, attached the prince to staff of Colonel Richard Harrison of the Royal Engineers, where it was felt he could be active but safe. Harrison was responsible for the column's transport and for reconnaissance of the forward route on the way to Ulundi, the Zulu capital. While he welcomed the presence of Louis, he was told by Chelmsford that the prince must be accompanied at all times by a strong escort. Lieutenant Jalil Brenton Carey, a French speaker and British subject from Guernsey, was given particular charge of Louis. The prince took part in several reconnaissance missions, though his eagerness for action almost led him into an early ambush, when he exceeded orders in a party led by Colonel Redvers Buller. Despite this, on the evening of the 31st of May 1879, Harrison agreed to allow Louis to scout in a forward party scheduled to leave in the morning, in the mistaken belief that the path ahead was free of Zulu skirmishes. On the morning of the 1st of June, the troops set out, earlier than intended, and without the full escort, largely owing to Louis's impatience. Led by Carey, the scouts rode deeper into Zululand. Without Harrison or Buller present to restrain him, the prince took command from Carey, even though the latter had seniority. At noon the troop was halted at a temporarily deserted kraal while Louis and Carey made some sketches of the terrain, and used part of the thatch to make a fire. No lookout was posted. As they were preparing to leave, about 40 Zulus fired upon them and rushed toward them screaming. The prince's horse dashed off before he could mount, the prince clinging to a holster on the saddle. After about 100 yards a strap broke, and the prince fell beneath his horse and his right arm was trampled. He leapt up, drawing his revolver with his left hand, and started to run, but the Zulus could run faster. The prince was speared in the thigh but pulled the assegai from his wound. As he turned and fired on his pursuers, another assegai, thrown by a Zulu named Sabanga, struck his left shoulder. The prince tried to fight on, using the assegai he had pulled from his leg, but, weakened by his wounds, he sank to the ground and was overwhelmed. When recovered, his body had 18 assegai wounds. One stabbing had burst his right eye and penetrated his brain. 2 of his escort were killed and another was missing. Lt. Carey and the 4 men remaining came together about 50 yards from where the prince made his final stand, but did not fire at the Zulus. Carey led his men back to camp, where he was greeted warmly for the last time in his career. After a court of inquiry, a court-martial, intervention by the Empress Eugenie and Queen Victoria, he was to return to his regiment at Beria, shunned by his fellow officers for not standing and fighting. Carey endured several years of social and regimental opprobrium before his death in Bombay, India, on the 22nd of February 1883. Louis Napoleon's death caused an international sensation. Rumors spread in France that the prince had been intentionally disposed of by the British. Alternatively, the French Republicans or the Freemasons were blamed. In one account, Queen Victoria was accused of arranging the whole thing, a theory that was later dramatized by Maurice Rostand in his play Napoleon IV. The Zulus later claimed that they would not have killed him if they had known who he was. Langala Balali, his chief assailant, met his death in July at the Battle of Ulundi. Eugenie was later to make a pilgrimage to Sobhuza's kraal, where her son had died. The prince, who had begged to be allowed to go to war and who had worried his commanders by his dash and daring, was described by Garnet Wolseley as a plucky young man, and he died a soldier's death. What on earth could he have done better? His badly decomposed body was brought back to Woolwich Arsenal, on board the British troop ship HMS Orange, and overnight he lay in state in the western octagonal guardhouse by the riverfront. The funeral procession, including Queen Victoria, went from there to Chislehurst where he was buried. Later, his body was transferred to a special mausoleum constructed by his mother as the Imperial Crypt at St Michael's Abbey, Farnborough, Hampshire, England, next to his father. The Prince Imperial had appointed Prince Napoleon Victor Bonaparte his heir, thus skipping the genealogically senior heir, Victor's father. Prince Napoleon. Legacy. The asteroid moon Petit Prince was named after the Prince Imperial in 1998, because it orbits an asteroid named after his mother. In the days when London's telephone exchanges were named, with dialing using the first three letters of the name, the exchange that served Chislehurst was named Imperial. The names were converted to numbers in 1966. The Imperial Exchange is still recognizable as the block of numbers that begin 020467XXXX. In literature, the death is presented in some detail in G. A. Henty's The Young Colonists, a tale of the Zulu and Boer Wars. The narrator describes it as one of the most shameful incidents ever in British military history. In the R.F. Delderfield novel Long Summer Day, Boer War veteran Paul Craddock buys a farm in 1900 or 1901. Craddock is aware of the events, because by coincidence he had been born that very day. In the play Napoleon IV by Maurice Rostand, the prince is killed in a carefully planned ambush arranged with the connivance of Queen Victoria, who fears that if he comes to power France will outstrip Britain. In the climax to the play, the prince's fiancée confronts the queen. In a 1943 Southern Daily Echo article, former sapper George Harding recalled being ordered to take a horse ambulance and find the prince's body and bring it back to the column. The Prince Imperial had been out on reconnaissance mission with a party of the 17th Lancers. Describing the mission, he said, "We advanced to a dried-up riverbed, and had to cut away the banks to get the ambulance across. Eventually, we reached a kraal beside a large mealie field where we found the bodies of the prince and some of his party. They had been surprised by Zulus as they rested in the kraal. The Zulus broke out of the mealie field and killed them before they could remount their horses. The prince had been stabbed 16 times with assegais. We made a rough coffin and put his body in the ambulance. After burying the other bodies where they were found, we went back to the column. The prince's body was taken back to England for burial." Gallery. As a Child, The Prince and His Mother by Franz Xaver Winterhalter, 1857. The Four Napoleons, 1858. The Prince with His Parents in 1861. Bust of the Prince by Jean-Baptiste Carpeaux, 1865. The Prince and His Dog by Jean-Baptiste Carpeaux, 1865. The Prince Imperial, 1870. As an Adult, The Prince in June 1878. Portrait by Charles Pourrian. The Prince Imperial in 1878. Bust of the Prince. The Prince and His Mother by James Tissot, 1878. The Prince in Uniform, 1879. Titles, Styles, Honours and Arms, 1856 to 1871. His Imperial Highness the Prince Imperial of France, 1871 to 1875. His Imperial Highness Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, Prince Imperial of France, 1875 to 1879. Lieutenant His Imperial Highness Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, Prince Imperial of France. Coat of Arms of the Prince Imperial. Imperial Standard. Monogram of the Prince Imperial. Ancestors. Citations. Filin 1920. 292. Filin 1920, pp. 56, 57, 84, 238, 272. Abiechud 1985. 512. Abiechud 1985. 513. ABC Markham 1975. 210. Kurtz 1964. 299. Morris 1994. 529. Morris 1994. 530. ABC Morris 1994. 537. Wolseley 1922. 44. Solar System Exploration. Asteroids, Moons. National Aeronautics and Space Administration. 2011. Retrieved 18 September 2011. London Director Exchange Names. Retrieved 1 June 2014. Southampton, survivor of the Zulu War. Vivid story of final battle at Ulundi. Southern Daily Echo, 30 December 1943. ABC Night, Ian. With his face to the foe. The life and death of Louis Napoleon, the Prince Imperial, Zululand, 1879. Staplehurst, Kent. Spellmount, p. 80.